What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Tuesday, December 2nd edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. Apologies for the late start. I managed to mess up building lineups like 8 different ways, a different way each time, but finally got it done. So going to take an early look at how I'll be attacking DraftKings NBA tournaments if the slate started right now. Obviously, a lot of moving pieces between now and lock, but wanted to do the show earlier. I will generally be more in this time frame. I think people preferred it last season, so going to go back to that. Obviously, jump in the Run the Sims Discord. We have an NBA channel over there. The Discord is free. For right now, the projections are free as well. While we finalize these, they will be going live in the near future. But for now, you can use them for free as well. So use those, add them to your process, jump in the Discord as things change throughout the day. But going to take an early look, talk through all of the games, going game by game for the DraftKings main slate. We have 5 games on this one, starting with Washington and Philadelphia. This game does have a ton of moving pieces. Washington is on the second end of a back-to-back, and we do not have an injury report yet. We assumed that Chris Middleton is out in our projections. You can see here the 0-minute projection. Still having some issues with our filtering and with the banner at the top as far as the display goes. So bear with that. But again, you're not paying for it right now if you use them. But we can see the primary, most of the relevant projections when I filter. If I take that filter off, we can see all of the Washington projections. So I will go that way. But again, we have Middleton projected out. That's not official, I don't think, but it's likely on the back-to-back. There could also be other guys out for Washington. We do know that Alex Sarr is out as well, which is the main piece here. Once again, we'll probably get a Marvin Bagley start. We'll probably get Tristan Vukcevic backing him up. They both did well for their respective salaries last night. They certainly both still project as good point per dollar guys tonight as well. Bagley played 29 minutes. Vukcevic played 19, rounding. They split 48 minutes. That's more or less what you should expect. There is some chance that Washington plays smaller. We did see them do that in the game that Sarr and Bagley were both out. Vukcevic only played like 17 minutes. They went with some small ball lineups. That's not going to be the norm. You should expect more often than not that you'll get Bagley and Vukcevic splitting minutes. You can see here that we have 28.5 minutes going to Bagley. We have 20.5 going to Vukcevic. They did actually overlap a couple games ago when Sarr was out, so that is possible as well. But about 90% projected ownership coming into Bagley right now in my numbers. Realistically, in large field stuff, probably comes in a little bit lower than that. But he's going to be really, really popular, assuming he starts at 3,600. Vukcevic projected for close to 50% ownership as well. 5-game slate. You're going to have people playing both of them, which I think is fine. Again, it's the same thing I talked about yesterday. Opportunity cost at center and utility is obviously high, but they are both clearly underpriced here. You have one less game than we did yesterday as well, so the opportunity cost is a little bit lower. You don't have, Jokic on the slate, although I guess he wasn't on the slate yesterday either. He was on the night slate, but opportunity cost is a little bit lower with the 5 games. So both of them are going to be really, really popular. I'm getting to 85% Bagley right now, even at that 90% ownership projection. It's just really difficult to get away from somebody that's over a fantasy point per minute guy that is likely playing 28 to 30 minutes and is sub 4K on a 5-game slate. I'm getting to 35% Vukcevic as well. So a little bit less than that 50% mark, but again, he's a point per minute guy. He's probably playing around 20 minutes. If Bagley gets in foul trouble or the game blows out or something, you're probably getting even more from Vukcevic. Although I don't remember which game it was, but the game where Sarr was out and Bagley was out and Vukcevic still played 17 minutes, they actually didn't use Vukcevic in garbage time. So kind of worth noting, but not super actionable for DFS. I don't think that potentially they think Vukcevic is too valuable for garbage time. I don't know if that will be a continuous thing or not. But either way, they're both just really, really cheap. They are 2 of the best point per dollar plays right now. I'm getting to other cheap pieces on the Wizards as well. Now, this could be just it's early in the day thing and ownership. Sites have different projections right now. Ownership isn't giving enough credit to the secondary pieces on the Wizards and may not until we get an actual injury report. But with Middleton projected out, it benefits Justin Champagnie. It benefits Cam Whitmore. Champagnie, $3,500. Whitmore, $3,700. You can see that we have 19 minutes projected to Whitmore. We have 21 minutes projected to Champagnie. That makes them both look like pretty solid point per dollar plays. You have forward eligibility on both, which is nice. Right now, I only have about a 10% ownership projection to Champagnie and Whitmore. As a result, I'm getting to 28% Champagnie. I'm getting to 24% Whitmore. Again, if those ownership numbers do happen to come up as we, after we get a Washington injury report, if, Middleton is projected out, if other guys are out, etc., then maybe my exposures come down, but they do project as pretty good point per dollar plays. And probably most importantly, they are forwards, so you're not giving up a center spot. You could potentially play a lineup where you have one of Bagley or Vucevic, you go to Champagnie and or Whitmore, and then you can, pay up at utility, where a lot of your opponents are going to be paying down at the utility spot because they're going to go to both of Bagley and Vucevic, for example. So far this season, Whitmore, 0.96 DraftKings points per minute. It's really just a matter of him getting on the floor, finding playing time. He is a solid point per minute contributor. And, Washington missing Sarr, but also missing Trey Johnson, missing Corey Kispert. If we assume Middleton is out, there are a lot, relatively stable minutes available here, wing minutes available for Whitmore and for Champagnie, who's also just shy of a fantasy point per minute so far this season. So definitely keep an eye on the injury report for the Wizards, but pretty likely that those two end up looking like solid pieces. CJ McCollum getting 22% ownership. I have 17%, 6,600. Candidate probably to rest on the second end of a back-to-back, given that he is CJ McCollum on a god-awful Wizards team. But if he does play, you should have the offense running through him. Alex Sarr is the highest usage guy on the team this year. You take him off the floor, and it benefits or should benefit McCollum, who has the second highest usage rate on the team. Also notable that Sarr actually has a higher assist percentage than CJ McCollum this year, so you could see a bump in McCollum's playmaking as well in the minutes that McCollum has played without Alex Sarr on the floor this season. And I do think Sarr is the much more important piece here compared to Chris Middleton. But Middleton, is obviously involved as a secondary scorer, secondary playmaker as well. But we've seen Middleton clearly take a back seat this year behind Sarr and McCollum. 1.2 DraftKings points per minute for Middleton in 189 minutes without Sarr on the floor so far this year. Usage rate jumps from 24% to about 28%. Assist percentage goes from about 16% to 20%. So you do see a bump in the rates. You see a bump in the production for CJ McCollum. Bilal Coulibaly getting 13% ownership at 5,100. I have 13% as well. He is not the best point per minute guy. He's played 110 minutes without Sarr, only 0.74 DraftKings points per minute. But he is somebody that is young, is likely to, play relatively big minutes here, could get a couple of extra minutes with Middleton out, or if Middleton's out, potentially. We have him projected for 32 minutes, only a 22.5 fantasy point projection. Again, not a good point per minute guy, but small forward, relatively inexpensive, last guy in type piece. Keyshawn George sucked for me and a lot of other people last night, but he is 6,800, getting 8% ownership. I have 9% of him. Not super excited to get to him at that price tag, but overall, he has been good this season. 1.05 DraftKings points per minute. He is somebody that should benefit from Alex Sarr not being on the floor in terms of opportunities. 21% usage rate overall this year, 22% assist percentage overall this season. If you take Alex Sarr off the floor, waiting for those numbers to load, but 197 minutes for George. Slight bump in fantasy production up to 1.08 DraftKings points per minute, 21.5% usage rate, 25% assist percentage. So we've actually, in that limited sample, seen a bump in assist percentage. We haven't seen a bump in usage, but over a larger sample, you could certainly see more usage for him as well. I think he's a relatively high upside guy, but that salary does account for it at 6,800. So I think the clear priorities here for Washington, again, assuming, regardless, we know that Sarr is out. I think the clear priorities are Bagley and Vucevic. And then if Middleton is out, Champagnie and Whitmore, I do think, are underpriced. They look pretty good as value options. CJ McCollum is, I guess, somewhere between a secondary play and a priority. 22% ownership. I have 17. But if he's in, he does benefit from Sarr being out. One way or another, there's going to be a lot that you want to get to from the Wizards. The exact names are kind of up in the air since we don't have an injury report. Probably won't until I would guess 1:30, maybe a little bit later. But one way or the other, the Wizards are going to be an important part of tonight's slate. XX Achilles said, is there a plan to have value or points per dollar or just CSV, the projections in top optimizer of choice? I mean, you can get points per dollar by just adding a formula, but we do plan on adding that as well so that you can sort by it, see it on the screen, etc. But yeah, I mean, obviously, and I'm sure you're aware, but you can just add that formula if you want to. But we do plan on adding that from just a ability to sort, see it on the screen standpoint as well. Moving over to the Sixers, this team is completely up in the air as well. Joel Embiid is out. We know that. No Kelly Oubre, no Trendon Watford. Andre Drummond is questionable. Paul George is questionable. Quentin Grimes is questionable. Jared McCain will be available. I don't even really want to spend too much time digging into all the potential things that could happen with Philadelphia. For one, because there's a million different ways it could go. And for two, because as I've mentioned before, with this only being now the third NBA show I've done this season, I don't have all of the rotations completely memorized yet. And it would take me a lot longer to dig into these than I would like. Give it probably 3 or 4 more shows, and I'll have everything memorized and be able to, off the top of my head, just go through all of those pretty quickly, but still not the case right now. Still a little bit rusty. And again, there's just a million different versions of this that you can potentially get. But if Andre Drummond is in, he is likely to start. We don't have Joel Embiid, as we know. Drummond is a very good point per minute guy. He's got a very good matchup here against an Alex Sarr-less front court. You're getting Marvin Bagley. You're getting Tristan Vukcevic. Andre Drummond should have his way. I do think our projection on him is way too low here. I don't really know why it's that low. That's something we'll have to look at. But should not be below a point per minute on Andre Drummond, especially ever, but especially in this spot. So not surprisingly, I didn't really get to any Drummond. He's only projected for 2% ownership right now as well. If he plays and is 2% owned, I personally am pretty interested in getting there in tournaments. He, maybe hasn't been the best point per minute guy relative to the past so far this season, but I don't really see any reason that he should not absolutely destroy this Washington front court if he's out there. Also, you have a Washington team that has a bunch of really shitty scorers. So in addition to just Drummond should get whatever he wants at the rim, Washington should miss plenty of shots in this game. 1.08 DraftKings points per minute for the season for Drummond. He, again, used to be better, but I think the upside's really high for him at 6,300 if he plays. I'm surprised he only has 2% ownership. Again, it probably has to do with the fact that you just have such clear-cut value on the other side of this game with Vukcevic and with Bagley. And so it does create a situation where you can just get a different roster construction. I talked about having interest in like Champagnie and Whitmore as value plays from Washington. They don't project as well as Bagley / Vukcevic, but there is the potential, like, let's just say Andre Drummond goes for 50 fantasy points at 6,300 or any other mid-range center, but just talking about Drummond right now, let's say he goes for 50. If you can have Bagley and Vukcevic both go for, 25, 30 fantasy points at 3,500 or 3,200, and they're really, really good point per dollar plays. But if Drummond is one of the highest scoring raw scorers on the slate, you can actually have a situation where like Champagnie scores 5 fewer points than Vukcevic, or Whitmore scores 5 fewer points than Vukcevic, and you're still better off with the lineup that has like Bagley plus Drummond and Whitmore instead of Bagley plus Vukcevic and a 6K forward potentially. So I do think it's an interesting spot to look at, just paying up at least one of the center spots and hoping that the gap between raw scores is just big enough to outweigh the point per dollar gap, and you can make it up elsewhere. I think it's a very good spot for Drummond if he's in. If he's out, you get another sub 4K center, most likely starting with Bona. He is likely to be the backup center anyway. He's getting 2% ownership. I got to 5% with him projected as the backup. But if he starts, certainly another guy that you can look at in that Bagley and Vukcevic range. He would take some of the ownership away from them, I would expect, but only a 0.75 fantasy point per minute guy this year. He's not as good, even if he's starting, he's not as good a fantasy option as Bagley or Vukcevic. He would just be closer to them and probably siphon away a little bit of that ownership. For the rest of the Sixers, Tyrese Maxey projecting for tons and tons of ownership. I have him at 66% right now at 9,900. Very high raw projection in the context of the slate. We have him as the highest projected player on the slate, or period today, but on the slate. Very good matchup. Talked about it yesterday. Washington just being a cheat code. They are one of the least efficient defenses in the league. They play at one of the fastest paces in the league. So it looks really, really good for Tyrese Maxey. No Joel Embiid is good for Maxey. If Paul George misses this game, then the offense runs through Maxey even more. I'm getting to 51%, even with him projected for 65% ownership. Clearly, he looks very good. Jared McCain only getting 10% ownership at 4,200. I'm 2x that right now. Certainly interested in McCain. That price tag remains cheap. And if guys get ruled out, McCain will look even better. That ownership will come up. But even if, George is in, even if Grimes is in, I am still interested in McCain because he is so cheap at 4,200. I do think he'll play enough minutes in a very appealing matchup to be interesting. We've seen 28, 29, 25, and 26 minutes in his last 4 games. He is not on, any sort of super restrictive minutes limit in his return from injury. We have him right now only projected for 21 minutes. So again, that's something that could come up, but even at that 21-minute projection, at 10% ownership, I'm interested. And certainly that projection comes up if you have Grimes and or George out. Dominic Barlow getting 15% ownership. I only got to 7%, 4,800 power forward, solid, point per dollar guy. Projected for 27 to 28 minutes, projected for about 21 DraftKings points. He's fine. I just, probably pivoted to some Whitmore, pivoted to some Champagny, but no problems with Barlow. And he should look better if Drummond is out. Playing time potentially goes up a little bit, but you're also taking a rebound monster off the floor in Drummond, and that should be good for Barlow getting more rebounds. Also, Quentin Grimes, 12% owned. I have 15% at 6,600. Looks good if he plays. Obviously, if he doesn't. Paul George getting a ton of ownership at 25%, 6,500. I'm not getting to him right now. That one is a spot that I would like to get to a little bit more, but I think it's probably just kind of an ownership thing. And maybe a little bit of a roster construction thing too. Like I was saying, if you're using more Whitmore, using more Champagny, maybe you're using them over George, and then you are paying up at center, paying up at utility, and being different in that way. But clearly a good matchup for Paul George. Just don't know, for one, if he will play. Did play 28 minutes on the 30th. We have him projected right now for 26.5. So maybe that number comes up a little bit when we rerun projections later on in the day if George is in as well. But certainly I think a good play, just not one that I personally am getting to right now. VJ Edgecombe only getting 2% ownership. I am getting to a bit of him at 5,700, getting to 6%. So not anything crazy, but a little bit above the field. Projected for 25 minutes, played 21 in their last game. Somebody that certainly you would expect to benefit if George and or Grimes were to miss this game. But got the start, played 21 minutes. He's averaged 36 minutes per game overall this season, 30 minutes per game in his last 5. We have him projected for 25 to 26 minutes right now. So I think that Edgecombe in this matchup, like any relevant, fantasy player that isn't getting ownership against the Wizards is somebody that I am interested in getting to on a 5-game slate in large field tournaments, even if their median projection isn't the best, because you just have the ability to get so many additional possessions against the Wizards, such a lack of defense. You don't have Sar around the rim. Marvin Bagley and Vucevic are not going to get it done. So just a really appealing spot to get to. Obviously, the popular Sixers are fine, but anybody that has a real role here, whether it's McCain, Drummond, Edgecombe, that isn't getting ownership, is interesting as well, just because you can have such big games against the Wizards. Portland taking on the Raptors in Toronto. For the Blazers, Q-tag on Donovan Clingan. No Drew Holiday. Nothing else really relevant injury-wise. This looks more like a secondary team. 16% projected ownership coming in to Toumani Camara. He is in 15% of my lineups at 5,500. He's kind of just self-explanatory. It's Toumani Camara. He's not like your primary scorer or anything like that, but he does do enough when he's on the floor and plays enough minutes that he's fine as a last guy in. We have him projected for 35.5 minutes here. pretty much in line with the field. Same for Jeremy Grant, 6,500, 14% owned. I have 11%. Those are the only two guys projected for above 10% ownership on Portland right now. If Klingon is out, it will make Robert Williams look better. It will open some stuff up in the front court, but with Klingon projected in, not a ton of ownership coming into this team. I am interested in Deni Avdija as a high upside, relatively contrarian piece. It worked out really well the last time he played, got him at 2% owned. He scored like 75 fantasy points. Obviously, you're not expecting that to happen again, but he's very, very involved in a variety of ways on this team. The reason that the ownership is going to be relatively low is that he's $9,500. He's only $400 less expensive than Tyrese Maxey. His median projection is like 5 points lower than Maxey. So you're just going to have people struggle to click on Deni Avdija instead of Tyrese Maxey, but he's going to beat him. I mean, 8 to 9% projected ownership to Avdija right now, 66 to Maxey. Maxey is the clear favorite. He's not a 6-1 favorite just because he's 4 or 5 points higher in median projection. I certainly want more Maxey than Avdija. Again, Maxey is going to beat Avdija the majority of the time, but the gap is probably going to be a little bit wider than it should. Avdija is the type of guy you can use if, you are taking on a lot of ownership, going to Bagley, going to Vucevic, going to some of these really popular value plays. You can click some Deni Avdija instead of Maxey and then just hope to run a little bit good there. The ceiling is certainly very, very high. Avdija at 1.35 DraftKings points per minute so far this season, 28.7% usage rate, 26.5% assist percentage. He has the second highest assist percentage on the team behind Drew Holiday, who is out. He has the second highest usage rate on the team behind Shaedon Sharpe. He has an 11% rebounding percentage, which is the second highest or third highest behind the two centers, Klingon and Williams. So this is somebody that can triple-double any given game. Obviously, the matchup is not as appealing as Maxey's matchup against the Wizards, but everybody knows that. It's, you're not gaining any sort of advantage by hammering the point that Maxey gets to face the Wizards. Like, everybody's accounting for that. It's in everybody's projections. Everybody knows that you seek out matchups with the Wizards. So you will get a nice ownership gap here, I think, between Avdija and Maxey that you can look to exploit in lineups where you need to save some ownership. So I do have 14% Avdija right now. I'm getting the 6% of 4K Chris Murray, 5% of $6,200 Klingon. They're both projected for 2% ownership. Nothing super interesting to talk about there. But again, Klingon is somebody, in that Andre Drummond salary range where if you do decide to maybe save money at forward spots instead of at center, getting to some Klingon does just naturally give you a different roster construction. He is a high upside guy. Again, it's not the optimal build, but he is a 1.18 DraftKings point per minute guy and does have the potential, if he plays, to give you enough raw points that he can separate from those good point per dollar plays on Washington that everyone is going to look to. Stephen Leibowitz mentioned it. But yeah, if Klingon is out, I wouldn't expect like massive minutes from Robert Williams. But, obviously probably could get an extra minute or two. You do have, Williams, somebody that clearly you expect them to be cautious with his minutes. He played 19 minutes without Klingon in their last game. He played 20 minutes in the game prior where Klingon was in. So it's something that, like, you do want to pay attention to the ownership on Robert Williams. Like, I think Robert Williams is a perfectly fine, low-owned pivot from, say, Vucevic, even if Klingon is in. He's probably going to get, somewhere in like the 16 to 18 minute range. Right now we have him at 15 to 16 minutes. He's somebody that, like, at 1% owned, if you wanted to in large field tournaments, you could click him over Vucevic anyway. Granted, he's like $900 more. If Klingon is out, you want to pay a lot of attention to Williams' ownership. Like, it should go up a little bit because it does stabilize the minutes, but you want to make sure, like, just throwing numbers out there, like, let's say Klingon's out and Robert Williams' ownership jumps to like 30%. I would probably just, like, use the Washington centers for value, look to some other value pieces, hope that Robert Williams doesn't go for, like, 2 fantasy points per minute or something like that, which he can. But you want to be very aware of the ownership because his projection should increase if Klingon is out, but it shouldn't increase by like a ton. It's not, you're not talking about, like, when Marvin Bagley goes from 18 minutes if Sarr is playing to 30 minutes if Sarr is out. You're talking about Williams probably going from like 16 or so minutes to like 20 minutes, give or take. So like he's better, but you want to make sure that it's not some massive jump in ownership. If you get a reasonable jump in ownership, then yeah, he looks a little bit better and you should probably play a little bit more Robert Williams if Klingon is out. So do pay attention to all of that stuff. Caleb Love getting 1% ownership. I don't have him. The priorities for me, or not even priorities, the guys I'm getting to the most are the same as the field. Kamara and Grant, the only guys for the field above 10%. I'm also getting the 14% Denny Avdia as a high upside contrarian piece. For the Raptors, there is a bit more ownership coming in here. Taking a look at their injury report, no RJ Barrett today. He's the only relevant piece. We have 29% projected ownership coming into Brandon Ingram, 24% coming into Emmanuel Quickly, and then 10 to 20% coming into all of Jacoby Walter, Scotty Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl, 5% coming into Jamal Shed, and then 2% to Mamukelashvili and Grady Dick. I don't really have anything that's too different from the field in terms of my player exposures right now. I'm getting to 23% Brandon Ingram at $8,100. Playing time should be there. We have him projected for 34 minutes. He is, one of the pieces that they can run their offense through. You do, even with RJ Barrett out, clearly have plenty of mouths to feed with Brandon Ingram, Emmanuel Quickly, and Scotty Barnes. You have Poeltl out there as a solid rebounder as well. But overall this season, 1.07 DraftKings points per minute for Brandon Ingram. 28% usage rate is actually the highest on the team, ahead of Barrett, who is second, and Barnes, who is third. If you take RJ Barrett off of the floor, Brandon Ingram goes from a 27.8% usage rate and 1.07 DraftKings points per minute to, I don't know, because again, it's not loading as quickly as I would like. I would expect that you get a little bit of a bump for Ingram. I wouldn't expect it to be massive because, again, you do still have Quickly and Barnes to soak up some of that production as well. Actually, basically the same in fantasy production, 1.06 DraftKings points per minute, but the usage rate does jump to 31.4%. So at the very least, you're getting a higher ceiling for Ingram. It could be that he's just going to struggle a little bit from an efficiency standpoint with one less guy on the floor that defenses have to worry about. But it's also a 313-minute sample size. So it could just be a small sample thing. And over time, you will get increased production. Scotty Barnes' usage rate goes up as well. 27.5% usage rate for Barnes without Barrett on the floor. Quickly up to a 23.5% usage rate from about 21 as well. So all three of those guys see an increase in usage as you would expect. Just makes all of them look a bit better without RJ Barrett, but the ownership will be there. So I'm getting to 19% Quickly. I'm getting to 17% Barnes. Jakob Poeltl, 13% owned. I have 11%. 5,900. So far, he looks like the guy that the field's going to prefer out of the mid-range centers, at least the ones we've talked about. He's projected for more ownership than Drummond. He's projected for more ownership than Klingon. Obviously, both of those guys are questionable, so that could be part of the reason why. But range of outcomes for all these guys is very, very similar. So I would pay attention to final ownership projections there. You don't like Poeltl should probably be like a little bit more popular, just given that he is a little bit less expensive. But you shouldn't, I don't think, be getting a huge gap in ownership between like Poeltl, Drummond, or Poeltl, Klingon as we get closer to lock. So do pay attention to that. Range of outcomes is pretty similar, even if the median projection is favorable for Poeltl. Jacoby Walter getting 18% ownership. Started last game, $3,800 price tag. I'm getting to 9%. He's a perfectly fine point per dollar play. He's cheap. He is shooting guard and small forward eligible, which is super useful. You can get him into the most positions in your lineup. You have, just a lot of roster flexibility there. Opportunity cost is as low as it can possibly be as well. That being said, he is not a great point per minute guy. 0.75 DraftKings points per minute without Barrett on the floor this year. Obviously, he's not leading the team in any sort of category, or at least you're not expecting him to. Like, he's obviously behind every other guy, Poeltl, Ingram, Barnes, Quickly, in terms of usage, or similar to Poeltl in terms of usage, obviously behind the other three, Ingram, Barnes, and Quickly. Obviously, he's not going to rebound at a higher rate than Poeltl. So he's just kind of out there. You're hoping that he plays enough minutes to give you a solid point per dollar score. He's a good value piece, but he is the kind of guy where if he's going to get a lot of ownership, I can find other players that, have similar upside, even if their median is a little bit lower. Jamal Shed, I think one of those guys, 5% ownership. I'm getting to 9%. He only projects for about 18 minutes, so he is projected to play fewer minutes than Walter. He also doesn't give you the forward eligibility. That is nice, but he's a fantasy point per minute guy, so he actually projects similarly to Walter, even in less minutes. I don't mind getting a little bit more of him. I don't mind getting to some Mamu Kalashvili with power forward eligibility. He is 4,700, so he is a little bit more expensive, but 1.09 DraftKings points per minute this season, only projected for 2% ownership. And again, the really important thing, you can play him at power forward if you want to pay down there. Memphis taking on the Spurs in San Antonio. For the Grizzlies, we have a Q tag on Jock Landale. We have no John Morant, no Ty Jerome, no Brandon Clark, no Scottie Pippen Jr. For the Spurs, Q tags on Riley Minix and Harrison Ingram, completely irrelevant. No Stephon Castle, no Victor Wembanyama. Neither of those are new. Not a ton of ownership coming into anything on the Spurs. 15% coming into Devin Vassell at 6,300. 12% coming in to Keldon Johnson at 5,500. 10% coming into Barnes at 5K, and then like 5 to 6% on De'Aaron Fox and Julian Champagnie. Nobody else really getting anything at all. I'm very much in line with the field here. I have 17% Vassell, 14% Johnson, 11% Fox, 9% Barnes. I don't think there's anything like super interesting to point out with these guys. We've kind of just seen them play multiple games, in their current situation. All of these guys have reasonable upside. We have seen some big games from Devin Vassell at low ownership recently, but now the ownership is coming up. Overall this season, 0.84 DraftKings points per minute for Vassell. Taking Victor Wembanyama off the floor, you expect, obviously all of these guys to produce at a higher level. Playing time, should be there. 32 to 33 minute projection for Vassell and for Fox, 32 minutes for Barnes, 26 for Keldon Johnson, 30 for Champagnie, who's actually given us some surprisingly big games recently as well. With no Wembanyama on the floor, 1 fantasy point per minute in 363 minutes for Vassell, 0.8 for Barnes, 0.85 for Champagnie, nearly 1.2 for Keldon Johnson. Really high rebounding rate for Keldon Johnson. He actually has the highest rebounding percentage on the team in minutes that Victor Wembanyama has not been on the floor. So that is something that is interesting to note. For a $5,500 Keldon Johnson, has a 21% usage rate as well. De'Aaron Fox at 1.35 DraftKings points per minute for without Wembanyama on the floor. So all of these guys look pretty good, but you have had salaries adjust as well. Fox only $900 less expensive than Tyrese Maxey. That'll help keep ownership in check there, but plenty of solid just secondary options here on the Spurs. Not sure why I started with the Spurs side, but moving over to the Memphis side now. For the Grizzlies, again, pretty much status quo as far as what we've seen from an injury standpoint. We do have the Q tag on Jock Landale, which I don't think is super important. Not much ownership at all coming into Memphis. Jaren Jackson Jr. getting 12% ownership at 7,400. You could probably argue that he looks a little bit better if Landale's out, just because maybe he gets some more minutes at the 5 behind Zach Edey. But at 7,400, mostly just going to look like a secondary option one way or the other. He is in 10% of my lineups, pretty close to the field there. 7% ownership coming into Cedric Howard, 6% to Vince Williams, who has been very, very good as the point guard without John Morant, but he's gotten relatively expensive as well. His salary on DraftKings is up to $6,200. I have 9% Williams at 6% owned. I have 13% Coward at 7% owned. Nothing that really looks like a priority from Memphis. I have 5% Edey at 2% owned. So another mid-range center that I'm not prioritizing. I'm not jamming him into lineups, but I do think being a little bit over the field makes some sense just to get you that different roster construction again. Did want to pull up Vince Williams' assist numbers without John Morant. He has, I think, like a 17 assist game, a 15 assist game mixed in recently. So you have seen him, really take on that role and do pretty well with it so far. Overall this season, without John Morant on the floor, 1.09 DraftKings points per minute for Williams. He has a 33.5% assist percentage. Cam Spencer is at 29%. So those are the two guys that you've seen really step up as playmakers without Morant. Williams, just kind of an unexpected one. Like, I don't think it was on anybody's radar necessarily if, at the start of the year, that if you said John Morant's going to miss a bunch of games, Vince Williams is going to just start racking up assists. But that's what we've seen. Jaren Jackson, 1.09 DraftKings points per minute without Morant on the floor as well. Cedric Coward, 0.96. Like, there's solid pieces here, but prices have just adjusted on them for the most part. So that's why you're seeing not a ton of ownership to either side of this game. It's not that there aren't good plays or guys that can have good games. It's more so just that salaries have adjusted. Steven said guessing Vince Williams' usage is kind of low. Yeah, it's like 21% without John Morant. So like it's not non-existent. You're not talking about somebody that doesn't shoot at all, but he does have a lower usage rate than obviously Jaren Jackson. Usage really for this team is pretty spread out though. Like Cam Spencer's at 20%, Santi Aldama's at 22, Cedric Coward's at 19.5. Edie's at 19. There's not really, other than Jaren Jackson, there hasn't really been anybody that stepped up as like, a really high usage guy. So in the context of the team, Williams is still one of the higher usage guys. It's just, in the context of $6,200 fantasy players, 20% usage is pretty low, but a 33% assist percentage is high for that. Usually your primary point guards are getting higher salaries. So, he has a ceiling for a 5% guy, but clearly not like the best point per minute guy, or point per dollar guy rather, or anything like that. Minnesota taking on the Pels in New Orleans, about a 121 total here for the Timberwolves, about 113 for the Pelicans. Minnesota injury report is clean. Nobody that I've ever heard of is even, actually, I have heard of Enrique Freeman. He's available. Doesn't matter. I don't know who Rocco Zakarsky is. Sounds like somebody that played football when they had leather helmets, but he is out. Not that that matters whatsoever. So clean injury report. You are getting some ownership here to Minnesota. 5 guys projected for double-digit ownership, and, it's the 5 that you would expect. Anthony Edwards getting 26%, Julius Randle getting 23%. I have basically the same as the field in terms of exposures there. 9,400 for Edwards, projects behind Tyrese Maxey, but he is also a little bit less expensive. He does obviously still give you a high ceiling. Julius Randle, 8,200 at Ford. We haven't really had Fords that we love. It's been, a lot of paying down, finding value Fords. So it does make sense that Julius Randle is getting ownership here. Both of these guys give you very high ceilings. Both of them contribute in a variety of ways, which is really nice. We know that Randle obviously rebounds, he scores, he facilitates a bit. Edwards does a bit of everything as well. So they both look good. Then you get 2 guys in the teens, Jaden McDaniels, Dante DiVincenzo, Naz Reid, all projected for 13 to 17 or 18% ownership, all priced between $5,600 and $5,800. Very, very similar plays. I have 15% McDaniels, 14 DiVincenzo, 10% Naz Reid. They're all similar. McDaniels and DiVincenzo probably playing more minutes than Reid, barring foul trouble to Rudy Gobert. But Reid is a 1.11 DraftKings point per minute guy, while DiVincenzo and McDaniels are 0.9 fantasy point per minute guys. So they all project similarly. They are all very similar plays. If their ownership projections end up skewing towards one, then I would probably just play more of the other 2. But for right now, ownership is flat across the 3, and so are my exposures. Rudy Gobert, 4% ownership. I have 9%, $6,100. Rinse and repeat everything I've said about Drummond and Pirtle and Klingon and Edie. It's the same thing with Gobert. He projects for like 30, 31 DraftKings points. That's not going to get him to just show up in a bunch of lineups when you run an optimizer and you have 2 Washington centers that are free. But Rudy Gobert is capable of getting 45, 50 fantasy points here or there. And if he does that, you probably need him at 6,100. So just another guy that you can throw into that bucket of, hey, let's build some rosters that are not the optimal roster construction, be different that way, and hope somebody from this $6K to $7,500 bucket of centers just goes out there and nukes the slate, and you have to have them. It's a pretty reasonable approach. There's not one in particular that I necessarily want to put, all of my resources into. But if you just think of them as like a basket of stock, basically, and say, something from this range is going to pop, I think that it's a very reasonable and strong approach for tournaments, and Gobert is certainly part of that basket. On the Pels side, this might be the lowest owned team on the slate, certainly the lowest owned team that we have talked about so far. Taking a look at their injury report, we have a Q tag on Jordan Hawkins, Q tag on Trey Murphy. That one obviously matters. No Jordan Poole, no DeJounte Murray, obviously. No Matkovich, no Herb Jones. Trey Alexander and Hunter Dickinson are available. Don't really care. But pricing here is not particularly favorable if Murphy is in. If Murphy is out, it does open some stuff up. Obviously, he is a primary scorer for this team. He plays a lot of minutes. He missed the last 2 games. Zion missed the last game, but he is probable. In the game that Zion played and Murphy missed, you got 38 minutes from Saddiq Bey. He's playing a lot of minutes, probably one way or the other, but certainly stabilizes those minutes. You can get a bit more of Alvarado. Micah Peavy played 32 minutes in the game that Murphy missed and Zion was in. The last game where both Murphy and Zion played, Peavy only played 21 minutes, so that's a big bump for him in playing time. You should get a bump in playing time for Bryce McGowan's as well. He doesn't do a lot from a fantasy standpoint, but he'll play more if Murphy misses this game. But right now with Murphy projected in, 5% ownership coming into Zion, 5% to Alvarado, 4% to Trey Murphy, and no ownership going anywhere else. I'm 2x the field on these main pieces, but again, that just means like 10%. I have 10% Zion, 10% Alvarado, 9% Murphy. Perfectly fine with me. It's not wrecking my night. If they don't do well, they're not the highest projected guys on the slate. They're not the best point per dollar plays. They don't stand out as priorities, but they're all, Zion and Murphy are guys that can just go get 50, which is almost definitely in the winning lineup if it happens on a slate that looks like this. Alvarado, 4,300, still somebody that can play, mid to upper 20s, depending on how the game goes. If Hawkins is out, that should help his playing time as well. But, good point per minute guy, can play his way into more minutes and is still cheap for the ceiling. I have no issue being a little bit over the field, but certainly not guys that I would want like my entire night revolving around or anything like that. Beyond that, I have 2% Jeremiah Fears at 6K. I have 1% Derek Queen at 6,400. I have 1% Saddiq Bey at 6,600. Prices have just jumped on all of these guys. If Murphy is out, everyone does, look at least marginally better. And then finally wrapping it up with the Knicks taking on Boston. 2-point spread in this one, Boston as the favorites. Taking a look at the injury report here. For the Knicks, OG Anunoby is out. Landry Shamet is out. For the Celtics, nobody questionable. Neemias Queta is probable. Derek White is probable. Tatum, of course, not playing. So nothing from a Q-tag standpoint that we need to talk about here. On the Knicks side, another team with very little ownership. Another team where I'm basically just going to be 2x the field, it looks like, on their main pieces. It doesn't involve me putting a lot of resources into them, but it does create a situation where I'm getting above the field on guys that are capable of scoring 50 fantasy points, which I think is kind of just like a key number on this slate where the highest projected guy is 50. Beyond the rabbit hole said Murphy is in. All right, thanks. Good to know. Don't have to worry about that one. That is a game that starts an hour after after the slate starts. So that's good to know. For the Knicks, 8% projected ownership coming in to an $8,800 Jalen Brunson, 7% to Josh Hart coming off of a very big game his last time out, 4% coming into Cat. I have 17% Brunson, 13% Hart, 12% Cat. Again, these are just all guys where they are not going to be super popular because they're not the highest projected players. They're not the best values. They're not going to show up when you run, optimal lineups. But they all are volatile players that have high ceilings and are not going to be popular. So I am going to be mixing them into lineups a good amount, it looks like. And that's exactly what I would want. Mitchell Robinson, 3,500, getting 2% ownership. I have 3%. If you want to use him in a lineup here or there where like maybe you're playing Maxey, you're playing Bagley, you're playing, really popular players, you need a cheap center, you don't want to go to Vucevic, for example. Click Mitchell Robinson and hope he beats Vucevic, but that's not a bet that I want to make all that often. So, not somebody I want a lot of, but certainly can fit into like a lineup here or there, depending what that lineup looks like. Mikal Bridges, 6,900. I'm not getting much at 3% owned. I have 3%. He is somebody you could argue is, in that same group with like Josh Hart, where you do just occasionally get the Mikal Bridges game and nobody's going to have him. So you could play him. He's just not one that's showing up for me. I don't really have much McBride or Clarkson. Neither does the field. To me, it's Brunson, Hart, and Towns that are showing up right now. On the Boston side, a bit more ownership coming into them than the Knicks. Derek White getting 17%. Jaylen Brown is getting 22%. Nemes Keta is getting 16% at 5,100. 6% coming into Pritchard, 3% to Hauser. I have 15% White, 14% Brown, only 7% Keta. So I am a little bit below the field there. It seems like I'm just kind of turning some of that ownership probably into, Gobert and Klingon and those guys that I was a little bit over the field on. But Boston looks fine. I just don't think that they look like that much better than the Knicks when you consider range of outcomes, for example. So I am playing those Knicks guys at a similar rate to, White and Brown. Tatum's been out the whole year, so it's not like prices and everything haven't really adjusted there. 9,300 for Brown, 7,400 for White. They're good plays. I just don't think that they're like drastically different than other mid-range plays that are getting a lot less ownership. 130 injury report updates from chat. Middleton is out. All right, that was expected. George downgraded to questionable. Yeah, wouldn't be surprised if he returned from injury recently. I assume you're talking about Keyshawn, because I think Paul already was questionable. Zion downgraded to questionable. Misi downgraded to questionable. Hawkins available to play. So thought the Pelicans injury report got cleared up, but apparently it got uglier. So we will have to keep an eye on all of that stuff. To recap what I'm getting to the most right now, with the normal caveat that, one, my player exposure shouldn't matter to you too much, because a lot of it is just everything is interrelated. You can make good lineups with pretty much any relevant player. But for me right now, at guard, my highest exposed guards are Tyrese Maxey, Anthony Edwards, Brandon Ingram, Jared McCain, Emmanuel Quickley, mostly paying up at guard, but I am using some Jared McCain for value. At forward, getting to Justin Champagnie, Julius Randle, Cam Whitmore as my highest owned forwards. So I do like those Wizards forwards. They'll look even better if Keyshawn George is out as well. They're not guys that you're super confident in their production, but they are cheap. They are, in general, good point per minute guys, and they should find playing time here. Julius Randle, one of the highest projected forwards on the slate, so getting to him as well. And then at center, mostly paying down with Bagley and Vucevic, but I do think, again, that just mixing in those mid-range guys, not getting to tons of any of them individually, but just, managing to get a little bit above the field on Drummond, Klingon, if they're in, Edie, Gobert, does make a lot of sense. But clearly, getting to more Bagley and Vucevic than anything else. So that wraps this one up. Thank you for checking out the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the thumbs up, all of that. Run the Sims Discord is free. Projections are free on the site while we finish ironing those out. So take a look at those, and I'll be back here again tomorrow. Good luck on your lineups tonight.